Hi everyone, okay, so welcome back to this channel of crochet, crafting, knitting. My name is Nikki, but today we're going to be doing some crafting, specifically glass painting. So this is a hobby that I do not as frequently as my knitting and my crochet, but do really quite enjoy, do find quite therapeutic, and I'm currently in the middle of a big project for somebody's wedding. So I'm going to show you some clips of the glass painting. Sorry if the video is not as well edited as usual. I say well edited. I'm working with budget software, so it's never brilliantly edited, but the clips are just as I've done different bits of glass painting. I've had to keep stopping and starting to clean my brushes, so I apologise for that, but I hope you enjoy this video, and I will see you in some of the video clips in a bit. Okay, so here are some of my glass painting projects, I suppose. It started off with a little project to make little tea light holders. So if I just take the tea light out so I can tip this up. This purple theme was something I was really big on as I was growing up, and I wanted something to match my bedroom. So I copied the flower off the wallpaper pattern and made it in this nice purple glass painting to put a little tea light in. So that was my first project. This was sort of the project that inspired it all. And since then I've been doing a couple of little bits and pieces. I'm hoping to get a photo of one that I did which was similar that I gave to my nana, so if I manage to get hold of that photo it will be on the screen. And if not, there's just the usual awkward pause. And yeah, I've recently been doing some things for a wedding. So I'll show you first what they look like when they're just done in outline. So this is a nice rose, which I can paint any colour, but the main thing is to first do it with an outliner, and that will hold the paint in place, because obviously as you put this down to dry, I would recommend putting it as flat as possible, so that usually means holding it in place like that, because if you tip it like that, then gravity is going to pull all the paint, and actually if you've got lots of paint on there it will go over your outliner, so you want it to be as flat as possible. Sometimes I will do something like this in parts because of that, because I don't want to have paint drip and then overlap and merge with anything else. So something like this I definitely did in parts. I started by doing the little green bits and letting them dry, adding the yellow and then painting the white over the top of that. And I've done that on both sides of the jar. So that's a finished product. Somewhere which is partway between is these here. So these are the ones I'm probably going to paint today. I don't know how well you can see it if I hold it up to the camera. There are little bits of purple already painted on, and these will provide a bit of shading for when I put another coat of colour over the top. And the finished product has these nice little flecks of purple in the white, which I think looks quite nice. So that's another finished product there, with the leaves added too. And the final one that I have to hand is a simpler design. There's no sort of shading involved in this one, but it was very, very fiddly doing the outliner. The outliner for this was done in parts, so I would have to do part of the sort of maybe this one first, and then come back and do the ones between them, because the outliner was just going to be too thick otherwise, and potentially run and potentially get stuck to things that I didn't want it to get stuck to, so I did have to do these ones in bits. I had a bit of a production line going for them. So that's the final finished product I've got. I've actually got one here where I started by doing the white, and then I'm going to attempt to add the purple over the top, but I think that this project has been put away for a little while because we moved, but I think I decided that it was easier to do it the other way around, because I've got more jars with the purple added ready for the white coat. So yeah, that is what I'm going to be doing today. Hopefully I'll be able to get some video footage of that, but my setup is not brilliant, and so I do apologise if I can only send pictures. Okay, so I've set up some tools of the trade, because I'm going to have to do this video in parts. And the first thing I'm just going to talk about is some of the tools you're going to need to do some glass painting. So obviously the first thing you're going to need is a jar. Types of jar that you might want Old chutney jars are great because they have usually got this square structure, so they've got nice flat edges. It means you can put it down to work. Sorry about that. You can put it down to work on, nice and flat. You can, you know, it's what you're used to working on, flat surfaces. So they can work quite nicely. Just make sure you get all the sticker off, all of that horrible nasty residue off. However, when it comes to using a more cylindrical jar, it's not so much about the size of the jar, it's about how much curvature is in the jar. So some products like to make these really unique curvy jars. Just no, not unless you're a lot more used to using the outliner, which I'll talk about in a minute, because otherwise you're just going to get really lumpy and bumpy outliner. It's not going to look very pleasing. You want a flatter surface. Now obviously these are cylinders, so that you're going to have some curvature, but what I mean by a flatter surface is this bit in the middle, okay? This here is flat, it's in one dimension, it's just curved in this one. So you're looking for a big patch like this. What you want to avoid is these bits like at the bottom of the jars, where what happens is the manufacturer increases the weight at the bottom of the jar for stability by adding more glass in the bottom, and you get raised bumpy bits that are horrible to work on if you're a beginner. Even if you're intermediate, I don't like working on them. It makes for really awkward outliner work. So you want a jar that has lots of this space here. So this works quite nicely. This is just an old dip jar. Things that you might get your tomato sauces in, or pickled onions or anything like that, they work quite nicely too, because even though they have this sort of lump at the very bottom, so like that's about 1.5 centimeters at the bottom, I wouldn't work with, it's got all this space here that I can work on. And the last sort of jar is a big sized, I think this one was a mayo jar, about 500 gram jar. It's got a massive section there I can work on for bigger projects. So I'll start with the outliner because I mentioned that. In your projects, you're always going to need to outline, and that's because glass paint is, it's a strange one because it's viscous in that it will sort of clump together given time, but also it's quite runny and it can move away from where you originally applied it unless you've got some outliner to hold it in place. This is your outliner. I've got a couple of different outliners. These are quite good. There's a lot in them and it's easy to control, but you definitely want to tip it up just 5 minutes or so before you're going to work with it, because they have a habit of clumping at the bottom of the cylinder and you might get air bubbles partway through your work and you might think, have I run out already? You haven't run out, it's just all at the bottom, so tip it up and let it seep down to the bottom for a bit. The other thing which you can use but you don't need to, it's not 100% necessary, is a dilutant. So again, because glass paint has a certain quality to it which makes it suitable for working on glass, water can sometimes mean that you don't get a proper clean on your brushes, so you might want some dilutant to actually break down the pigment. However, if you're really careful with the water and use it really frequently, it can be fine. You just do not at all want to let it dry on your brush. If it dries on your brush, it's over. So the brushes, obviously you need your brushes, you need your paint. Now I've actually got a couple of different things of paint here. These ones are from the same brand as the dilutant. This is kind of a very standard glass painting brand. They do a range of colours. I've got some bright, not bright, some very deep even crimson here. Now you see the bit that's caught in the lid? That is enough for one jar. You really don't need an awful lot of colour. Obviously if you're working with other colours besides red, but if I was just doing like a project that had a bit of red in it, that is perfectly sufficient for one project. There's absolutely loads of paint left in here. So don't worry too much about the price of them. Obviously you have to weigh that up with how many jars you're doing and how many colours you're using. But these are maybe about £4 or £5 each, but they last forever. You just got to make sure that you keep giving them a shake every now and then if you're not using them for a while to keep them pigment suspended. This is white. Now I fully recommend that if you're going to do anything with white, you use this brand, because I've used the other brand for white and it comes out more clear. This actually has lots of pigment in it, and if you want actual white colour on your work, you need this. And then yeah, this is the other brand, so this works perfectly fine for colours. They've got a range of colours too. Lots of yellow left in there. I've already used all the yellow that was in the lid. But again, you're going to want to keep shaking these up as you use them. So these are the Artiste ones, and these are the PBO Vetra range. So that, yeah, that's your paints. Other things that you probably want to help: tissue for cleaning your brushes. That's probably actually a must. And I find the little cocktail stick is really helpful for helping with the eyeliner. So if the eyeliner has had a slight air bubble accident and I want to guide it back into place and make it more seamless, I can use the pointy end of cocktail stick, or I can also use the end where I've sort of snapped it off at an angle and made a little spatula out of it. Really cheap solution to fixing your outliner. So those are some of the tools of the trade. Let's get on with some painting. Okay, step one. Draw out a template. Put a little piece of paper in a jar and work out the size required. Once you've cut your paper to shape, tape it in place in the jar. Then you'll be able to use it to draw your outline. Feel free to draw with the outline straight onto the glass if you so desire, but I personally find that this helps me get a uniform finish across the different projects. Step two. Let the outliner dry. Very important. If it's not dry, it's going to merge with your paint. It's going to make a mess. Step three, paint. Today I'm going to be painting this jar here, which already has a hint of purple in the rose petals, but I'm going to be drawing the leaves. I've chosen the darker green that I have for the leaves of the rose because I've used a slightly lighter green in the lavender. You won't be able to see on camera, but I have also tried to do some gradation with it by doing coats that are all the dark green, half and half light green and dark, and all light green, which has given a nice shading effect, but I'm not sure it's visible on camera. But for the roses, I want to go for all dark green. So I'm going to give my paint a little shake. I'm going to rest it against the glass for the moment. Okay. And this is what I mean about using the lid for paint supply, especially if you've just shaken it. I've got some water to the side here. I've actually got two pots so that if I change colours at any point, I can use a different pot of water. I'm just going to grab a bit of paint at a time from my lid and apply it. So I don't know if you can see what I mean about how it's quite a thick paint. It forms these drips that kind of become blobs if you're not careful. So what I try to do is to apply it with the gradient of anything I'm painting. So I try and get a loose cover on first and then try to apply it. So if the leaf's moving this way, I'm going to try and apply it that way to get the texture right. I've actually got a lot more paint on this side of the leaf than I have on this side. Try and spread that out a little bit more. Okay, and that leaf is done. I'm going to get more paint. Probably get a little bit more on my brush now. Start by spreading it on both sides so I get a more even paint coat this time. Hope you can see this okay. I think my own hand might be in the light. Trying not to. I apologise for my setup. This is not a professional channel. My creative pursuits are all hobbies, but I'm doing my best. There's another leaf. So just pull it down so I can get more paint. And this is going to dry relatively quickly. The good thing about a dark outliner is that you don't need to worry about going over bits that are just part of your detail. You just have to worry about making sure you're in the lines for that colour. Now, there's a degree to which if you do go over the lines, you can save it using your handy little cocktail stick. Because it's so viscous, you can make an endeavour to pick the paint up off the glass before it's dried to the glass. I'm not going to deliberately show you that on this project because this is for a wedding and I don't want to compromise the quality if I do get it wrong, but it is possible on some projects. It's easier if you've then gonna have another colour to paint over the top of it to mask any residual that did get stuck to the glass. Screen, yeah. Again, I also can't see whether I'm on screen or not at the moment, so I hope I am, and I hope you don't mind as I check. A little bit more green in there if I can get it. There we go. Get that water off my brush, really force it off, really push it against the bottom. I'm going to put this down actually because I do want to keep these brushes good quality. Get it all that colour, so I'm just using water at the moment, but these are the cheaper brand paints, so they are easier to come off. I'd have to use the solvent otherwise. Okay, so that's nice and clean, and now I can show you the leaves are painted in place. Now I'm going to let those dry before I do any other work because I don't want to risk getting any hints of green in my white rose. One way that they can be stood up to dry is leaning them against other projects as long as they are wedged in place. Some of the lighter jars will also hold in place if you wedge them in their own lid. Actually, that one is doing just fine, held up like that. So I'm just going to put that to one side and keep it balanced in there whilst I work on my next projects. Okay, so on this one we are going to do some of the white for the rose. So I just give it a little shake. And once again I've got plenty of colour in this lid to work with. I cleaned my brush so I can use it again. And we're just going to do a bit at a time. Now because this is white and the outliner is black, I'm a lot more careful about working in the lines, and because it is a lighter colour it can be helpful to do a much thicker coat of paint. I'm just going to try and do this very carefully. This is an example of where you'd have to do a bit at a time, definitely, and let a bit dry. Because as you're moving the jar around, you're going to potentially smudge paint if you haven't given it a chance to dry properly. So we've got a little bit of purple here I'm going to go over. I'm just going to try very loosely going over it. Don't want to hide too much of that colour. Just sort of blend it a bit. Okay, so you can see there I've just made a bit of a mistake. I'll get that in the water ready. Get my spatula and wipe it off. Just wiping it off the liner because it will be fine when it's painted over on the other side of the petal. You want to keep those brushes clean at all times. I think that should dry okay. I'm going to get some more paint and try this petal next to it. So being very careful not to paint over the liner on this occasion. We don't want too much white pigment on our purple highlights. And this is slightly more loosely applying because my brush was a bit damp. I should have dried it properly, but it's not too bad. have a tendency to hold my breath when I'm doing this. There we go. Okay, and that's another petal done. So I'm going to get my brush cleaned. And then when that dries, that's actually maybe a better example, I hope you can see that on the camera, of how the purple is going to come through the white on the finished product. So yeah, like I say, I don't know if you can see that, but when that dries, that should be okay. So I'm going to pop this to one side and let that dry as well before I attempt any more petals. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video with some glass painting examples. I hope you might consider taking up the craft as well. I hope you enjoy my projects. Sorry again for the shaky videos and the pausing videos and the sort of very quick stopping and starting. It's just how I've had to do this for this setup, because it's really difficult to pay attention to your video when you're trying to glass paint and you need to keep the paint steady and the brushes clean. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back to my regular setup, I'm probably sure, in the next video. Bye for now.